Do you dream of fairies and princesses? Then you've come to the right place. Welcome to Disney Coast to Coast.
Hey folks, and welcome to Disney Coast to Coast, the ultimate unofficial Disney fan podcast. I'm Jeff DePaoli, and on today's show, it is the first mini-episode of Disney Coast to Coast between Season 5 and Season 6 of Disney Coast to Coast, so thanks for tuning in. I hope you all had a fantastic Christmas and a nice holiday and everything. Today's episode is actually going to be all about Muppet Christmas specials and movies. And I know what you're thinking. You're thinking, Jeff, you're releasing this episode the day after Christmas, so why are we talking about it now? And there's two reasons for it. Number one, I love Christmas specials and Christmas movies, and because of that, I often run out of time to watch and view them all, so I actually give myself until January 1st to finish watching them all. So if you're in the same boat, if you go with that agreement with yourself, and if you don't, you should, you can do the same. And you know what, if you're done with the holiday movies, if you've been oversaturated at this point because you've been sitting in front of the TV watching Hallmark and Lifetime, well, you can just keep these in mind for next year, but I'm pretty sure you'll enjoy them all. Of course, Disney owns the Muppets now, but they didn't always. Of course, the Jim Henson Company created the Muppets, and so the Jim Henson Company basically made almost everything that I'm going to talk about today, but they are part of the Disney family now. But it does get very interesting because there are things that technically Disney owns here and technically doesn't own because it involves other characters and such, so it all gets very confusing. But let's just start back in 1979. There was a TV special called John Denver and the Muppets, A Christmas Together. Now, my guess is that most of you probably haven't seen this one before, but are probably pretty familiar with the album that they put out with a lot of Christmas songs featuring the Muppets and John Denver, and it's a really, really, really wonderful Christmas album, but there was a TV special that accompanied this. It's not super easy to find as far as purchasing it is concerned, but I'm going to give you guys a website at the end of this episode, so tune in for that. It's basically a recreation of a lot of the songs from the album, and it's quite nice. And then 1987 brought us A Muppet Family Christmas, which I really love. A Muppet Family Christmas is special because it really brought together Muppets, not just traditional Muppets like Kermit and Miss Piggy and such, but Muppets from all over the Jim Henson Company, including Sesame Street and Fraggle Rock, and it's really wonderful that they're all together to spend a Christmas together, and it's just really, really, really well done. Jim Henson makes a cameo at the end of it, which is awesome. There are edited versions of this, that the ones that you can typically buy on DVD and VHS were edited down. It doesn't have all the musical numbers, and in a lot of cases, I'll mention that with a lot of these specials, but the reality is if you don't know that stuff is missing, it's done in a way that you don't really feel like you're missing anything, but if you grew up watching the original, it's always a little bit disappointing when certain things you remember are cut out, but there's a way to get the full versions. Like I said, I'll talk about that toward the end of this episode here. Following that, in 1992, we got The Muppet Christmas Carol. Now, this, of course, was a major motion picture shown in theaters. This is probably the one that most of you all are familiar with. It's fantastic. I'm a huge fan of Christmas Carol in general, and The Muppet Christmas Carol is among my favorites. It's just really, really, really well done. You have Gonzo in the role of Charles Dickens, and Kermit in the role of Bob Cratchit, and of course Michael Caine as Ebenezer Scrooge. Really good. If you haven't seen Muppet Christmas Carol, I highly suggest it. But something interesting about this is the original home video version actually had more content than the theatrical version. There is a beautiful ballad in the film called When Love Is Gone, sung by Ebenezer Scrooge's younger self's girlfriend, whose name I'm blanking on right now. But in any case, she sings this beautiful love ballad that was cut from the film when it was shown in theaters, but when they released it on VHS years later, it was added back in the film. So I was kind of surprised to learn later when it was released on DVD, they did the original theatrical version, that this song was missing. So you can definitely get both versions easy enough at this point, but it is a fun little interesting tidbit. And if you are familiar with the album for this movie, or the soundtrack, there's a lot of songs on the soundtrack that aren't actually in the movie. So it's had a lot of changes and stuff through the years with this movie, but really, really good regardless. 1992, The Muppet Christmas Carol. Following that, in 2002, was It's a Very Merry Muppet Christmas Movie, which I love. This originally aired on NBC. And I mentioned it was released in 2002. It has a lot of very period-specific mentions, like Moulin Rouge is spoofed, and A Beautiful Mind, and many, many, many others. But it's basically a Muppet version of It's a Wonderful Life, which is a great movie. I love that movie in and of itself. And this is, Kermit's version of it, where he has that wish of, I wish I'd never been born. And he sees what life would have been like if he hadn't been born, and how this would have affected all of his Muppet friends and the world in general. So it's a really great made-for-TV movie with tons of celebrity appearances. David Arquette is in it, Whoopi Goldberg, Joan Cusack, and many, many, many others. So I highly suggest it's a very Merry Muppet Christmas movie from 2002. And then in 2008, we got a TV movie called A Muppet Christmas, Letters to Santa. This one, honestly, not my favorite. It's fine. There's nothing terribly wrong about it other than the fact that it's kind of boring. The premise is that Gonzo was going to mail a letter to Santa for his friends. He didn't get it to the post office in time, and they have to go on a journey getting the letter to Santa. If you're a big fan of Gonzo or Pepe, I would say you might really like this movie, but it's probably the least favorite of what I've mentioned so far. So once again, those were John Denver and the Muppets: A Christmas Together, A Muppet Family Christmas, The Muppet Christmas Carol, It's a Very Merry Muppet Christmas Movie, and A Muppet's Christmas: Letters to Santa. Now, of course, if we're talking about the Muppets and Jim Henson, there are a couple other Christmas specials I need to mention that technically aren't Muppet related, but if you know me, you've heard me talk about this before. I need to briefly mention 1977's Emmet Otter's Jug-Band Christmas, 1986's The Christmas Toy, and 1995's Mr. Willowby's Christmas Tree. Emmet Otter's Jug-Band Christmas is truly my favorite thing that the Jim Henson Company has ever done. I think it's phenomenal, so you should check that out. The Christmas Toy, it's kind of like the original Toy Story, way before Toy Story ever came out. There's a character named Meteora, which is basically Buzz Lightyear, and it's the same concept as Toy Story. It's wonderful, and in both of these films, Kermit the Frog has, he kind of plays host as both of them. He starts out telling the story at the beginning and comes back at the end, but because of the fact that Disney owns the Muppets now, in a lot of versions, Kermit is edited out of them. So there's, as I mentioned at the beginning, there's a way to get this. Now, I just want to make it clear, I have zero connection with this website. I don't make any money from it, but I found a website called KermiClownVideos.com. That's KERMI clownvideos.com. And this is a guy who collects everything Jim Henson, everything Muppets, and he has full versions of all these things I've been talking about. So if you really want the original unedited versions, I highly suggest you check out KermiClownVideos.com. I've definitely gotten stuff from there in the past, and it's often very good quality, and I've been very happy with it. I also mentioned Mr. Willowby's Christmas Tree. I only mentioned this one because it stars Robert Downey Jr. Yes, Iron Man himself plays Mr. Willowby in this special. It is quite terrible, but his performance is so bizarre and awkward. It's almost as if he wasn't even taking it seriously. It's bizarre. So if you're a fan of Robert Downey Jr., this is worth checking out. Not my favorite, as I mentioned. So in any case, guys, all of these films are wonderful Muppet and Jim Henson Christmas specials out there. If you're still celebrating the holidays, check out at least one of them. If you're done for the year, make this list, write it down, and check it out next year at the end of 2019. Guys, thanks for tuning in. Of course, don't forget, you're running out of time to order your 2019 Disney Coast to Coast calendar, so head to DisneyCoastToCoast.com and order that. And I'll be back with another mini episode of Disney Coast to Coast next week. Until then, folks, have a magical day. Bye!
Thanks for watching Disney Coast to Coast. Have a magical day.
Disney Coast to Coast is produced and hosted by Jeff DePaoli. Learn more about the podcast and become a supporter at DisneyCoastToCoast.com.